Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 77 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits, but I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here, you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. A quick shout out to my patrons: Aaron Borst, Ricky Garvin, Matthew Saint, Rob Garrison, Lyndon Onstead, Carla Hoffman, Utuk Zul, Julio Herrera, and Forrest Woodward continue to help me keep the lights on here, and I just want to make sure they know how much it's appreciated. If you'd like to support the show as well, you can do so for just $1 per month by going to patreon.com/welcome to Geektown, where as a member you'll get full scripts to the show, audio outtakes, and of course this monthly shoutout. Currently, patrons can hear the full 2-hour conversation Joel and I had on this episode and the last. That's a whole lot of bonus content available, so if you want more Welcome to Geektown in your life, join in. We're continuing our deep dive into WandaVision, as Joel and I discuss episode 3 of the first fully integrated MCU show. Like last episode, a quick spoiler warning, as we bring up specific moments from the 3 episodes that have aired, plus little tidbits from promotional material, including information about the identities of some characters that go by different names in the show. So, if you're trying to stay completely spoiler-free, come back to this episode after you've finished the series. Now, let's get started. Welcome to another special episode of Welcome to Geektown, where we'll be discussing episode 3 of WandaVision. And by we, I mean myself and my guest, Joel L. Say hello, Joel.
Hello, Joel.
I had a feeling that was coming.
How could it not?
So, just in general, what did you think of episode 3?
I thought this was another fantastic episode. There was so much fun in this one. I know that last week we spoke about this one having more of a Brady Bunch feel than the others. I kind of got a Partridge Family vibe out of this one more than Brady Bunch.
It definitely has Brady Bunch in it.
They're in the genes, yes.
The set decoration is straight out of Brady Bunch, and when the washing machine goes all kaflooey, among other things. Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of things that I was like, well, that's from the Brady Bunch. But when I heard the theme music, one of my first thoughts was Brady Bunch / Partridge Family. And so, yeah, I'll definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, the composers of the theme songs are clearly having a blast, and as a music geek, I'm really enjoying it too.
Yeah, there's some more Brady references that I saw. I mentioned the washing machine going all bubbly. There's an episode of the Brady Bunch where I think Peter uses a full box of detergent because he doesn't know how laundry works, apparently.
A little is good, a lot must be better.
Exactly. Then there was also the doll that Vision uses to practice the diaper changing. Yes. That doll looks nearly identical to Cindy's Katie Carryall doll that she has and makes reference to in numerous episodes as her favorite doll. In one episode, it gets stolen. Turns out it's by Tiger, the dog. That was another direct reference there. And they got the staircase looking exactly like it. They just kind of moved everything around. Because I've noticed that they keep the house layout almost identical. At least from the second to the third episode. In the first episode, there are no stairs.
Okay.
So in the first to the second episode, it changes, and we get the stairs going up, and we see that when she brings the Cabinet of Mysteries out in the rehearsal. And then in the third episode, the layout of the house is exactly the same, just all the decorations have changed. It looks much more like a 70s house.
Including the brick wall in between his and Herb's houses. It was a wooden fence in the second episode.
Oh, good catch. Good catch. I didn't notice that. Speaking of the divide between their houses and that exterior, that's another appearance thing that they go for, is all of the exterior shots are filmed on an interior set. The background of Herb's house is a matte painting instead of being another house.
I did not catch that. That's a very cool detail.
So, did you notice the coloring on this episode?
What about it?
Just the color correction done, how much it looked like a 70s sitcom episode.
I did. Yeah, that was super clear, or kind of muted and wood tones.
Well, but super bright, too. Like, Vision's eyes when he's outside talking to Herb and Agnes, and his skin tone and everything. I'd really love to see a behind-the-scenes featurette to see if they used a certain style of older film, or if that's all just computer color correction to make it look that way, or what exactly they did in order to achieve that effect.
I hope they give us all kinds of extra features on this show. There are so many things that went into the thought processes of every decision they made. I would love to see it.
Yeah, they did that for The Mandalorian. And I really hope they do a similar thing for this show once it's completed its season. So, I went and watched about half an episode of Brady Bunch just to compare and see how much they're holding to that kind of formula. There's one thing that they didn't do, except at the very beginning, was they don't have a lot of that incidental music.
True. That's right. They did do that at the beginning, but not much throughout.
Yeah, those 70s sitcoms always had that dun 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 dun, and it would be that little transition between scenes where they'd have like an exterior shot of the house or something like that. So a lot of the reason for that, I would think, in this case, is that much more of this episode is in real time compared to most episodes of 70s sitcoms.
Not just real time, but just the two of them. It was all, well, not all, but the vast majority of this episode was interior, inside the house, where it was just them talking and being in wacky situations in there alone. There wasn't a whole lot of transition.
Right, and that's both because there's a smaller cast, and like I said, and the real-time aspect of it. So there's not going to be a lot of transition there.
There was an opportunity going out of and coming back from the commercial, which was another very 70s TV show thing to do.
Yes, yeah, they could have done it then. They could have done it when it went from them in the living room to them in the, what became the nursery.
Right. Or transitioning between the scene in the driveway and the scene inside the house, back and forth there, but not a huge amount, because, as you say, that was all happening simultaneously.
Yeah. Another thing they did that is very fitting in with that 70s sitcom is going very hard on the laugh track.
Yes. It worked for him, though.
It worked for the most part. There were a few times where it was like, that's a little overboard, but...
Yes, but I felt like the times that it was overboard was intentionally overboard. Like, this is kind of like what we spoke about last week with the stop it. Stop it. It was that moment of, no, we're really digging into this universe now.
I can see that. So let's start talking about the moments in the episode. We start out with the pregnancy coming in from the last episode where she...
Discovered.
Yes, where she discovered her pregnancy. And I went on Twitter and did a quick ask to see if anyone had anything they wanted brought up in this episode. And Denise B., who also happens to be my sister... Hi, Denise.
What a coincidence.
Yeah. She wanted to know, as someone who knows nothing about Marvel but has been watching WandaVision, how is her pregnancy happening so fast? And I think there's a few reasons for that. There's external reasons of the producers wanting to tell this story in a certain number of episodes and that sort of thing. But then there's also some more internal logic to it as well, in that if you watch sitcoms from those earlier eras, pregnancies were always sped up.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that.
Pregnancies are sped up, and then children age really fast. There's usually, it's newborn baby, and then it usually jumps to about 4 or 5 years old.
Right. Young enough to still be really cute, and obviously young, but old enough to walk around and say cute things.
Exactly. So, in a way, they're following that just on a very sped up timetable. But then, also, the fact is, this pregnancy is not a natural pregnancy. It's done with some sort of magic or reality-altering abilities, and so it's not going to follow the normal rules of a pregnancy. You know, I mean, we saw that last episode where she went from 0 to 4 months in that.
And I think that, I mean, you mentioned that there may have been the external factors of the producers wanting to limit the number of episodes, but I think that even if they had a longer season, this one episode would have done it. I think that that's part of the eeriness of what's happening and the mystery and the confusion for both the characters and the audience. Vision was very confused in this episode.
Yes, he was. And they're asking the question themselves in one of the funny moments in there is, how did this happen? And the doctor's like, well, when a man and a woman
really
love
loves
each other very much. One thing I loved when they're talking about the baby, and I'm pretty sure this is the first time it happens, but when Wanda is saying, we don't know what this child will be like. Will he be human? Will he be synthezoid? That is the first time they've called Vision a synthezoid in the MCU.
Yes.
That is his usual designation in the comics. They'll sometimes refer to him as an android, but usually it is a synthezoid, which is basically just a synthetic man.
Makes sense, and it does make sense that the two of them have languaging things that we haven't been aware of. We saw in Infinity War that they have had 2 years of relationship off screen at that point. So, yeah, they've got a common language, and at some point they probably said, what do I refer to you as?
Yeah.
All right, on a totally different subject. Boy, oh boy, did this episode feel like we're going down the path that you mentioned last week, where she is really in charge of this. This is her psyche, imagination, worldview. It was... there were a couple of things that I felt that the world kind of felt like. I mean, there was obviously this Truman Show element of it.
Yes.
It really felt like that Twilight Zone episode, It's a Good Life, where the kid has control over everything, and if you make him upset, he'll send you to the cornfield.
Oh, yeah, the classic Bill Mummy episode.
Yeah, that one. She's him.
Yeah, we get that at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
But if she's not there, it seems like things break down more easily. Like, we get that first thing just like 4 minutes in, where...
With Herb trimming the hedges?
With Herb trimming the hedges, yes.
Yeah, because if she's in control, then proximity matters.
In theory, yeah.
In theory, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, well, who knows the rules of this? We're all figuring them out together.
And at the same time, there are definitely times where it feels like, okay, maybe she's in control, but maybe she's not entirely in control.
Yeah.
She feels like she doesn't always know that she's in this world also.
Exactly. For the most part, she acts like this is the world that she belongs in, and this is the world as it should be, even when things are going in a direction that she wouldn't want them to. Like her pregnancy speeding up, or her powers acting all funky as she goes into false labor and then into labor. All that stuff, if she were completely in control, she wouldn't have the portrait spinning on the...
Possibly. It's hard to say because, assuming that this is her world, she still set it up like a 70s sitcom, and that would have happened.
True, but then in the 70s sitcom, you don't want to give obvious things that, like, the whole stork thing, that is perfectly fitting in with the 70s sitcom, where Geraldine never sees the stork in a way that she thinks it's a real stork. She sees it once on the wall when it's in the same exact pose as the...
Which was great.
Great moment. But she never sees it moving around the house. But she does see the portrait spinning and all of that, which, she says, oh, I'm sure there's a rational explanation for this, but no, there's not.
Well, but again, if Wanda is in control, or if Geraldine is aware that Wanda's in control and just wants to maintain the illusion, either way, that's how she would respond.
It's how she would respond, but if she were in control, I don't think she would... I mean, we saw it. She tries to magic the stork away twice.
That is true.
And it fails. Which means that even with her reality-bending powers, something is outside of her control.
Maybe. It's hard to say. It could be a Roger Rabbit thing. I could have always gotten out of the handcuffs, but only when it was funny.
Fair enough.
She's in a 70s sitcom, and it was funny to have it happen that way.
True. But I do have my own theory as to what some of that happening was.
Okay.
And that is that Billy is also a witch. And that he is reacting to the pregnancy and to the Braxton Hicks and to being in labor. And that's stressful for him. And he's freaking out and doing some of this stuff obviously subconsciously. He's an unborn child.
Right. And therefore his powers are what's controlling the stork, for example, and she's trying to magic it away, but it's not... She didn't create it, so she doesn't have control over it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can see that.
Now, the only thing that contradicts that, I think it would be even more evidence towards that theory if Billy had arrived first, and if Tommy's birth had been less destructive. But instead, Tommy comes first, which does make sense with his superpower being speed.
Right.
And then Billy's birth, we don't actually see. It does that flip wipe, and then suddenly Wanda's walking around, and again, very 70s.
Very 70s TV show.
So, where A, labor happens in a minute 30 for twins, and B, you can be walking around and be totally fine after having just given birth. And C, those babies. Those are not newborns.
Which has always been a TV trope.
Yes, but more modern...
And they're perfectly clean.
Yes, I was about to say, more modern TV shows, at the very least, will put the little grape jelly and stuff on, and usually get at least a little younger, one that's a few weeks or a couple of months old, as opposed to those babies that we saw were easily a few months old. But again, it fits in with that 70s sitcom aesthetic perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
I guess your wife's childbirth was a little different.
Oh, it happened exactly like on the screen.
Oh, okay. All the appliances went crazy and
it lasted about 2 minutes, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure that was completely medically accurate.
Absolutely. And then when the birth was done, Jen was up and walking around. It was exactly like you saw it.
Oh, good to know that they're keeping to that level of accuracy in the show.
They're just super detail-oriented.
Speaking of details, we got 2 references to Hydra in this episode. Did you catch both of them, or one?
I did not. I caught the obvious one.
So the obvious one is the commercial, which was very much an homage to Calgon Take Me Away.
Boy, oh boy, was it. My wife used that phrase while we watched the show.
Yeah, I had it in my head. When the dog started peeing, I was like, oh, this is a Calgon Take Me Away moment, isn't it? And yeah, sure enough. So there's the Hydra soak, and they've been good about having the taglines mean something. And this was Unleash the Goddess Within, but I can't think of an exact analog to that in the comics that would make reference to. Wanda is, she's got her magical powers, but she's never been on the goddess level of things. Right. So it'll be interesting to see if that ends up being a reference that a rewatch will illuminate.
What was the other reference that you caught?
This one was more subtle. When my favorite deadpan delivery guy was on screen.
My favorite moment of the episode.
It was the one where I laughed out loud.
Yep.
I've watched the episode, I think, 3 or 4 times now, and I still laugh out loud at that moment. It's so cliche, but it works because of his delivery. Mm-hmm. So when Dottie comes in and asks, do these earrings make me look fat? And the power goes out and he says, oh, thank God. He's reading a newspaper at that moment, and it says 2 fire hydrants added on Main Street. But the way he's holding it, the NTS of hydrants is not visible for most of it.
Wow. Okay. God, they're so good.
Yeah, they really are, aren't they? Now, from one of the funniest moments, we go to one of the most disturbing. After the false labor, we get that real break in the show, where Wanda asks, do you think our neighbors know? And then Vision starts saying, it's more than that. Mm-hmm. And he goes through all that, and the music music comes up, and it's that tense...
It's the creepy music.
Yes. It's that tense, creepy music. And then it just jump cuts, which I thought was an interesting choice, rather than doing the rewind effect that they did in episode 2.
It's interesting, if you're watching that moment very carefully, it's not just a jump cut. The entire frame shifts over about 40 degrees, and then it comes up, and it just happens for a few frames. Like it was in the 70s, and someone took a knife and cut the clip and moved it over and re-edited it together.
Yeah, which is basically how they would have had to do it back then. Mm-hmm. If they tried to make a seamless edit like that. Which I find interesting that they do it that way, but they used the rewind effect in the 60s episode, because they weren't filming on video in the 60s.
No. Again, it all depends on what's actually happening. You know, we saw in the first episode whoever the watcher is watching this whole thing on a screen, and they clearly had a remote control in front of them.
True. So after that conversation, she starts to go into labor. She has her first contraction. I wouldn't say she's fully in labor yet, because she's still kind of walking around and doing stuff.
Right.
So when Vision goes and gets the doctor, that's when Geraldine arrives. And we get more of those 70s sitcom moments where she uses all the different objects to...
Oh, fruit!
Yes. To hide her pregnancy, and really stretching belief that Geraldine would not notice.
Which, again, I very strongly suspect is part of the point.
Right. I would agree with you on that. They are making ridiculous situations purposefully in order to say, this is not how people would normally react, but this is the world that we are in right now. And it also makes reference to, and this is something they still do to this day, is how great of lengths they will go to in order to hide an actress's pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. Geraldine showing up is interesting for a couple reasons. One of which being the reason that she shows up is to get a bucket because the pipes in her roof burst. But it is later told to us she doesn't have a home.
Yeah, I picked up on that as well. So I'll be curious to see if they try to explain that at any point. It seems like they're usually pretty good at avoiding that kind of plot hole, where there's something within the episode itself. Sure, from movie to movie or from episode to episode, there may be little inconsistencies and such, but to have somebody specifically say, I have a house, the pipes in it burst, and then 5-10 minutes later, someone else saying she doesn't have a home.
Well, again, that's part of whatever the story is. I think that inconsistency was for the benefit of Vision, really, who wasn't even there.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that only Geraldine and Wanda were there for that part of the conversation.
Well, but again, to maintain whatever illusion for the little boy who might send us to the cornfield if we don't maintain the illusion, you say what you gotta say.
True. So, Geraldine, as she's been called this entire time, that's not her real name. And I know you went to IMDb and looked up people's characters' names and such. Did you see what her real name was?
I saw it, but it didn't mean anything to me, so it didn't stick in my brain.
Okay. So her real name is Monica Rambeau. And this is not the first time we've seen this character.
Okay.
We saw her in Captain Marvel. She's the daughter of Maria Rambeau, Carol's best friend. She is Lieutenant Trouble.
Oh my gosh.
She is Lieutenant Trouble all grown up, and now is an agent of S.W.O.R.D. as we can see from the logo that she's wearing as a necklace.
The one that caused so much trouble at the end of the episode.
Yes, the reason why she was expelled from this universe, or whatever it is exactly.
Town. Westview.
Well, but we see that Westview is a real town.
Well, we see that there's a sign saying now entering Westview that is on the border of whatever force field shield lighting magical thing is surrounding the town, which, by the way, it's daytime inside and nighttime outside.
Right.
Again, very Truman Show. But that doesn't necessarily mean that sign indicates that the town existed before whatever is happening.
Possibly true, but the fact that sign is outside of the bubble, so to speak, I think says that the town exists or existed in the real world, and that she
usurped it.
Yeah, she took it over, and that's probably where some of these people come from, and that's why Geraldine / Monica specifically sticks out, is because she wasn't a resident of this town.
Which may very well be what Herb was trying to say when he said she's here because we're all... Yeah. Yeah, I agree that is a very strong possibility, but I'm open to the possibility that it's just the marker of don't go past this point.
That's also a definite possibility. Again, we're all figuring out these rules together as each episode unfolds.
It does make sense that the town was there and then Wanda showed up and suddenly it was her view of the world and there's this weird force field, and then Sword shows up and says, "What's with the big force field?"
Right. Oh, so when Monica comes through the force field, she's still kind of covered in Wanda's energy, and I wonder if this is her origin story. Because Monica in the comics is one of many characters who has used the moniker of Captain Marvel.
As mentioned in the replacement episodes
right.
You did about Captain Marvel.
Well, it wasn't a replacement episode. It was Who is Captain Marvel. It was mostly about Carol. But I did touch on the others who had taken that name at one point or another. And Monica, unlike Carol and Marvel and Janice Vell and all of the other Captain Marvels that have existed at one point or another, has no connection to the Kree. She gets her powers in an accident with an energy weapon.
Like you do.
Yeah, it's a fairly typical Marvel origin, but unlike all the rest of the Captain Marvels, it's not related to the Kree at all. So this could be her energy accident that happens to her in the MCU and gives her the powers. In the comics, she can become basically any form of electromagnetic radiation. Usually light, like lasers or photon blasts and things like that she'll do, but she can also become X-rays or gamma rays or infrared, ultraviolet, anything on the electromagnetic spectrum. And spectrum is one of the other names she goes by when other Captain Marvels come along and say, I have more of a right to this name than you do.
And as you say, I'm being surrounded by weird red magic and being forcibly expelled through this weird magic force field thing could very well be an origin story.
Yeah, it's a perfect way to bring her and her powers into the MCU, because something that people have noted is that while Wanda's powers were created by the Mind Stone, their color and the actual abilities themselves seem more related to the Reality Stone.
Yes.
Also known as the Ether from Thor the Dark World. And so it's definitely possible that Monica has had her reality changed and is now a superpowered being. But we'll see in the rest of these episodes, and then we've already been told that Monica will be appearing in Captain Marvel 2.
Good.
So, near the end of the episode, we get the cut back and forth between Agnes and Herb talking to Vision, and Wanda talking to Geraldine, which obviously ends with Geraldine/Monica being booted out. But Agnes and Herb present another break in the reality to us. And Agnes really seems to know a lot more than any of the other characters from the town.
Which, again, being the neighbor that meets up with Wanda and Vision as kind of the point person for the town does make sense. She may not be the head of the various committees, but she is the person who presents herself as being Wanda's friend as soon as they move in.
True, but I also think that this is more evidence towards my theory that A, she's Agatha Harkness, and that B, she has at least some control over what is happening or how it's happening. She is more connected to this than the rest of the town.
That does fly with her ability to say, no, Herb, stop.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of Herb, I would say of the townspeople, he's probably, other than Agnes, he's probably the one we've seen the most of. Would you agree with that?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. And in the previous episode, I talked a lot about Wanda's origins. And I mentioned the High Evolutionary.
Okay.
Care to guess the High Evolutionary's real name?
Well, based on context, I would say it has something to do with a herb.
Herbert Wyndham. We have not heard Herb's last name in the show yet. So it's possible that Herb either becomes the High Evolutionary after this, or is the High Evolutionary and is also involved in this.
Layers and layers and layers.
Yeah. Now, it's totally possible that this is a red herring and that Marvel is throwing in some names just to get people talking.
Success.
Yeah, they did it. Speaking of things that people are talking about, now I've tried to avoid other reaction videos and other people theorizing in order to have my own thoughts be my own thoughts and not just regurgitating what others are coming up with.
Absolutely. So have I. I've seen several show up on my Facebook feed. Here's 8 theories on what's going on. No.
No, I'll figure it out on my own. But I know one thing that people are talking about are the hexagons.
I noticed those. They're very prominent throughout. Or at least, if you watch an episode, they're not all that prominent, but they are consistent.
Yes.
Which does lend them some significance.
Yeah. You see them in the opening credits of pretty much every episode. You see them in Geraldine's earrings, the Cabinet of Mysteries, although that one is more elongated, whereas most of the hexagons that we see are regular
hexagons.
hexagons.
There's certainly, every episode ends with some kind of a fade out, or not a fade out, a zoom out into the frame of
an iris
hexagon.
in zoom out or / iris in to a hexagonal shaped frame. So the most obvious reference to hexagonal shaped items, I think, is the Mind Stone itself. If you look at the stone on Vision's forehead, it is a cut gem in a hexagonal shape, but it's not a regular hexagon.
Right, that's very elongated.
Yeah, the one on the Cabinet of Mysteries looks a lot like the Mind Stone. And I think that's more of a direct reference to that, whereas these regular hexagons are different.
Mm-hmm.
I think AIM, which in the MCU was a separate entity, but in the comics is an offshoot of Hydra, uses hexagons in their logos often. And we've had now 2 commercials that referenced Hydra or some member of Hydra. And then we also had the Hydra reference I mentioned earlier with the newspaper. So I'm wondering if Hydra isn't involved somehow.
Possibly. It's hard to say if they are directly involved or if they're just a major part of Wanda's psyche.
I think when we get next episode and we get a 4th commercial, it will lend more credence to my theory if that one is also Hydra, or if we switch back to more of a Stark Avengers. If we get a 50-50 of Avengers versus Hydra references, then yes, that is probably more Wanda's background and the different influences on her life. But if we get Stark, Hydra, then I think that would be pointing more towards Hydra actively being involved somehow.
Perhaps. It's hard to say for a number of reasons. Among other things, in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra has been a major part for several seasons and then was kind of sort of defeated. And in the movie MCU, they kind of went away after Civil War.
They did, but Zemo is going to be in Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Remind me, Zemo?
Zemo was the one who used the code words on the Winter Soldier in Civil War. He is the actual villain, the one who is at that base at the end.
Gotcha.
So he's still around, and Hydra was basically, say, a quarter of S.H.I.E.L.D. That's a lot of people that aren't just going to go away.
Yeah, and as far as S.H.I.E.L.D. was aware, Hydra was defeated long before then.
Well, until Winter Soldier, when they found out that they had infiltrated and...
Right. So it's an organization that goes underground very effectively for extended periods of time.
Yeah. And I think that this would be going back to the well too much, but it's possible that S.W.O.R.D. is some offshoot of Hydra, and that many of the agents, or at least some of the agents, aren't aware of that, which is how you can bring in heroes and good guys like Darcy and Monica and those guys into that organization, but still have it be the menacing force behind things as well.
Right. Yeah, I agree that would be drawing from the same well that they have used more than once already, but at the same time, it's
kind of Hydra's MO.
Yeah.
So, it could work, it could not. We'll wait and see. Now, one rare complaint I had with the show. For the first 2 episodes, they have been very good at sticking to the technology of the time when doing special effects. And unfortunately, they had to break it in this episode.
Sure.
Because if there had been a Brady Bunch episode like this, if there had been an animal running loose, it would have been a real animal.
Yes.
Because that's the only option that would have been available to them.
Mm-hmm.
But this is definitely a CGI stork.
Yes.
Which I understand that they had to do that for very specific moments. I mean, getting an actual stork to stand completely still in front of a painting of a stork would have been nigh impossible.
Right.
And having a stork bite at somebody's leg and have that be safe probably is
well,
a concern.
remember that safety concerns weren't as prominent in the 70s either.
Well, no, but that's another reason why they had to use a CGI stork today is because
right.
because we do have those concerns for the safety of the actor and the stork.
Right.
And so I completely understand why they had to do it. I just think it's kind of a shame that they had to break that aesthetic in order to have that effect.
It is unfortunate that they did what they did, but also, as you say, totally understandable.
And then the other moment that I thought kind of broke that aesthetic was when Vision returns after she's given birth to Tommy, and Vision changes back to himself. That looked much more modern in effects than I thought a 70s sitcom would look.
Yeah, in the 70s it would have been, let's do this take twice, one with you in the makeup and one with you out of the makeup, and we'll fade between them.
Or jump cut. But I guess once they've broken that aesthetic once, it's probably easier to do what they know how to do best rather than, try to keep up with the 70s aesthetic of special effects.
Yeah, but at the same time, they're so careful with so many other things.
Yeah, the first 2 episodes were so amazing at keeping that up, using wires and airbrushing them out for the floating dishes and everything, and then using jump cuts to put in the rope that was holding Vision up, and all those effects with the magic show. So I think it's a shame that they broke their own kind of rules with that, but it didn't detract from it too much.
Right.
Also, as the show progresses, we're getting more and more breaks with reality, with the sitcom reality.
Yes.
And so it makes sense that the effects could also break that reality as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as the show continues to progress, we're probably going to get more and more of reality breaking and the quote-unquote real world coming through. And now that Monica has broken out of, well, has been expelled out of...
Between!
So anyway, now that she's out of this sitcom world and is in the real world, I think we'll get full dialogue scenes of the real world starting next episode, is my theory.
Perhaps. It's also possible that she'll just show up again. And it will explain itself over time.
That's true. We could see that.
It depends on what the filmmakers want us to see.
True.
Because what we are seeing for the most part is the inside the town world. And little itty bitty little peaks outside. And as you say, that by the end of the season, they will have to have made that shift. But I don't know that episode 4 is where that's going to happen. I did want to ask, and I don't know if you have this knowledge at the top of your head or not,
Sure.
but the lullaby that Wanda sings to her babies, is there any particular significance to that? Was that something that they just generated on the fly? Do you know of anything that particular tune or that translation or whatever has in the world?
I went back to Age of Ultron to see if she sang it or something like that, or mentioned her mother singing it or something along those lines. But yeah, we haven't seen it in the MCU previously. And because comics are a visual rather than an auditory medium, we don't have a lot of music in Marvel Comics in the first place.
Sure.
So I don't think that that's any specific reference that we've seen at any point in the past. It's just showing her Sokovian heritage, her Sokovian background, and
giving Geraldine time to recall the world.
Well, yes, and bringing Wanda's natural accent back. We discussed this in the last episode and theorized as reality kind of breaks back if she was going to return to her more Sokovian accent or keep an American accent. And it looks like that when she remembers herself, she goes back to a Sokovian accent.
Yeah. I'm cheating, and you'll probably cut this out, but the lullaby, when you're watching with Portuguese subtitles,
oh, interesting,
the lullaby is translated into Portuguese.
Okay.
So the lyrics from Portuguese to English are, "I waited for you, and this day has come. My heart became a home full of light, full of light."
So hearing those words in English, again, that doesn't sound like any specific reference. It just sounds to me like a Eastern European lullaby that one would hear growing up in Eastern Europe.
Right. Or it's also entirely possible that this being in the presence of Monica, who you mentioned takes on the moniker of Photon, might have something in there.
Yeah. Good call. What was the last line exactly?
Full of light.
Right, yeah, I knew light was in there. I couldn't remember if it was full of or made of or...
Full of. My heart became a home full of light, full of light.
Okay. Yeah. So the fact that one of the last things we see her say around Monica has to do with light could affect things. So usually there is an emotional component or aspect to Origins. A lot of times it's brought up after the fact. Like the Hulk having multiple personalities, like Bruce Banner having multiple personality disorder. And that's why his powers end up with him shifting forms. And the Fantastic Four, Johnny is a hothead, Ben Grimm is stubborn as a rock, Reed Richards has a flexible mind, and Sue Storm is the unseen one of the group. And so there's always that added level to what the powers you get are when it's some sort of accident and not like mutant powers where you're just born with them.
Right.
And so, yeah, that those lyrics could connect to Monica that way.
Neat.
Nicely done. Then we get another song when Monica is expelled.
Daydream Believer?
Yes.
That combined with the commercial in the same episode does lend a lot of credence to something's going on in the mind here.
And of course, Wanda and Vision being so connected to the Mind Stone, there's definitely a dream-like aspect to everything. And that is a very apropos song to connect to that. Unfortunately, I heard some old school fans of the Monkees are being gatekeepers about it and saying, oh, if you're just getting the Monkees now because of Marvel, you're not a real Monkees fan. And let me just say, stop it.
Stop it.
No, let's not go there again. That is not the right way to be a fan.
Fandom is all about loving things.
Exactly.
And you shouldn't belittle people for loving things more recently than you.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how somebody gets into it. Just, if they're into it now, great. Help them along. And that's what I'm here for when it comes to comic books, and I hope there are other fans out there. I know there are other fans out there. I have a friend who does a Monkees podcast.
Nice.
And so, if this episode made you want to learn more about the Monkees and watch their episodes or anything like that, go check out the Monkees podcast. PAW.
Gotcha. I'm a little slow on the uptake, but I get there eventually.
And on that note, Joel and I ended our conversation about there. Episode 4 of WandaVision is probably out already, unless you listen to this the moment it releases. And you'll be able to hear us discuss all the salient details of that next week. But if you have anything you'd like to add to the conversation, please send in your questions and comments via email to welcometogeektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or go to the website, welcome to, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you'd prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcometogeektown or Twitter @geektownpodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcometogeektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show, so we can all tell them,
Welcome to Geektown. Population, us.
Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.